My name is Casey, and I'm a freelance web developer. I work a lot with React, and you can see me up in the top corner there. We probably don't want that. But anyway, I'm a freelance. It's really weird seeing myself. I'm a freelance web developer. I work a lot with React, and on Tuesday, Mark asked for a beginner talk on getting started with React. So I'm not going to talk so much about React itself, but more why it's beneficial and how to get started with it if I convince you that you should. So how many of you have actually built stuff in React before? Okay, so I promise I'll be quick, and no. How many of you like it? What do you like about it?
State management, I guess. So
yeah.
React Redux.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I was going to go with this. Is can I actually get my slides up now, Mark, please? Thanks. When we talk about what the benefits of React are, people talk about virtual DOMs and how there's great community and lots of third-party libraries and components you can find on GitHub and use out of the box, and there's debugging tools, and all of those things are true, but the real benefit of it, I think, is that is why it actually exists in the first place, which is that it allows you to express the state of your UI as a function of the state of your application. So if you're tired of writing code that looks like this is my code. You can make fun of it if you want. But the problem with trying to use the DOM level API as well as older libraries like jQuery is that they're really imperative. You're describing how you want to do something instead of the way that you want something to be. And this is actually doing a fairly simple thing, but it's quickly becoming code that's difficult to read and is difficult to write. And this goes, by the way, for libraries like Angular and Vue as well. So I'm not today going to tell you why you should use React instead of those things, just why you should consider a modern front-end framework. And I think React's as good a place to start as any. So to put this another way, you can think of what React does as kind of creating a pure functional transition from simple data structures like objects or arrays, maybe in my case like just a Boolean variable, is the sidebar open or is it closed, and going from there to describing HTML. So this is kind of like or if coding in vanilla JavaScript and manipulating the DOM directly is like being given the sequence of moves in a chess game and having to keep track of all the pieces and imagine the board at the end of it, going from that to writing React, for me at least, is like actually being able to see the board. Maybe if you're a chess grandmaster, you can follow the moves well enough to remember the whole thing. I'm not a grandmaster coder, and the world needs more software developers, or does not only need software developers that are grandmasters, it needs the rest of us as well. So for me, that's the actual problem that React solves. What does this actually look like in practice? Those are just analogies. I kind of Charlie Kaufman this talk, and I built a repo that actually is the presentation, so you can find it on GitHub. The code for these little buttons down here is this React component. And the point I want to get across here is that this is really just JavaScript. Can you guys actually see that? Yeah, how do I make it bigger? So this is a function. In JavaScript land, it's often called a component, but it's really just a function. It says function right here. It's returning a value which is a funny mix of HTML and JavaScript called JSX. And while this looks really strange, it's actually fairly simple. So these HTML tags are calling a function that's literally just creating that component, and if it's actually called, inserting it somewhere in the DOM. everything between curly braces is a JavaScript expression. So here what I'm doing is taking a variable and just comparing it to 0, it returns true or it returns false. And I'm using an AND statement, an AND expression rather, as a kind of way of conditionally rendering my button. So remember that in JavaScript, if you have an AND expression and the part before the AND symbol is true, it returns the second part. If the part before the AND symbol is false, it returns the first part. I hope I got that right. And in this case, if the current slide, which is just a part of the variable that's being passed to this function, is greater than 0, then it will evaluate the second part and render the button. Another thing that I really like about React is that because we're just working with JavaScript, the variables that I pass to my function can be functions themselves. And so I can assign this previous slide function to when the previous button is clicked, and not worry about what it does at this level. The execution of that function is being handled by a parent component, and it's being passed as a variable, just like numbers or booleans or whatever else is being passed down as a variable. What was the other thing I wanted to say about this? I think if you thought about how you would do this with procedural code, it would get really hairy pretty quickly, because you'd have to worry about not only conditionally rendering these various HTML elements, but also attaching event listeners to them and keeping track of all of that kind of thing. So this JSX code is, although it's easy to read, it's not real JavaScript that a browser can understand. And so this leads to a bit of a barrier to entry or an activation energy to get started with React, because while in the end you will make your life easier, you have to get over this initial hump of setting up a system where you can compile and compile your code for the browser rather than just writing JavaScript that the browser can understand. So if you open up your terminal and install all of these packages, actually you don't need to do that. So this package, again, is actually the presentation. It has 5 dependencies, and I'm going to go through very briefly what each one of them does. So first of all, React. Obviously, if we're going to write in React, you need to use React. By the way, I'm not going to go through installing NPM and Node. Maybe if you're a beginner, you haven't worked with that, but it's really platform dependent. So the easiest thing to do is just Google install NPM Node, and you can get instructions for your particular system there. The second package that we'll need is React DOM, and this is maintained as a different package from React. All it does is just inject whatever you've written into the DOM. There's also a Babel, which compiles the code that you write into code that the browser understands. It's often described as writing the future's JavaScript today, but I find that's a little misleading, because I don't think JSX is ever going to be part of JavaScript, and it can also work on things like TypeScript. So it can really compile lots of different things into JavaScript. You need a plugin specifically for React. And then finally, there's this really cool zero configuration bundler for web resources, which you should really check out, even if you're an old hat at these things. It is 10,000 times easier to get set up with than Webpack, and it is, in my opinion, the fastest way to get started writing React right away. Okay, so what I've done in my package file is defined a couple of scripts that will run the code and either set up a development server so that you can make changes and have them appear on your website very quickly, or actually build for production. So we're going to call this Parcel package, and we're actually going to pass it an HTML file. And what's cool about Parcel Bundler is it will take this HTML file and look through it for references to CSS or JavaScript files, even if they're on the local, or images, even if they're on the local file system, and create separate trees for those packages and bundle them as well. So you can have just a regular link tag to a style sheet, and you can have CSS, SCSS, or less here, and it will take care of building those resources for you. It'll do the same thing with JavaScript, and if you have Babel installed and configured, it will take care of the transpilation for you. It'll also handle imports within your JavaScript files, so you can break up your code into separate files in a way that makes sense to you and not sort of do things in the old school way of writing everything in a single file so that you can include it as a script tag on your web page. So Parcel really makes things quite a bit easier. So that should be enough to get up and running. Really the next step is to follow along with a detailed tutorial. I think really the only way to learn anything is to kind of do, to get started on a project yourself, or to follow along with the code in the project. The React docs are really good. The tutorial on here on getting started is as good a place to start as any, I think. Okay, so if you have any questions, I'll take them now, and I'm just going to leave my contact stuff up there. Sean?
I'm curious, like TypeScript seems to be getting more and more involved in projects.
Yeah.
Do you have experience using it with React and how well that works?
I have not. I know that it can be done.
I can speak for hours about
yeah.
how awesome it is. That's all we work with.
Flow type is sort of maintained under the big React banner, so that's Facebook's recommended typing solution for React. There's also a way of verifying the types as each component is rendered, which is nice because you see output in your console when you make a mistake. So there's different solutions for typings, whether or not it's actually TypeScript. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do you want me to leave this?
Exchange.js is Edmonton's JavaScript meetup. Thanks to our sponsors, Jobber and Investopedia. Support the meetup and like and share this video, and stay informed by following us on Twitter and meetup.com. Links in the description. See you soon!